My name is Shahrukh Khan, and this is my project topic, which is Amazon API Gateway. All right, so let's get started. So this is the agenda for today. So number one, we are going to first introduce the Amazon API Gateway. I will look at the big picture of what it is. We're going to show you some details on what Amazon API Gateway is, some use cases, security of what consideration that you should look at, advantages, one pricing examples, and then we will go ahead and wrap this up. All right, so before I go ahead and explain what Amazon API Gateway is, first I want to explain what API is. So API is a software mechanism that basically simplifies development by doing like abstract implementation details, establishing how information provider or an information user communicates with each other. So basically, in a typical web applications, a client sends a request and gets a response from an API that is connected or resides on a web server. So the API provides the interface to application resources such as like databases. So now I'm going to read this definition off the slide. So this is the Amazon API Gateway definition, which is a fully managed service that makes it easy for developers to create, publish, maintain, monitor, and secure APIs at any scale. So basically, API Gateway acts as like the front door for application to access data, business logic, or any functionality from your backend service. So the big picture is basically Amazon API Gateway enables seamless communications between microservices, backend system, and client applications. So you can solve issues of scalability, security, and monitoring any API management. So, for example, before API Gateway, manual API management was very complex and prone to errors. So here are some details that we're going to talk about Amazon API Gateway. So first is the core feature that Amazon API Gateway provide is that it supports for RESTful APIs and WebSocket APIs as well as HTTP APIs. So I'm going to talk about the RESTful API, which basically stands for representational state transfer, which is an architectural style for designing networked applications. So RESTful APIs adhere to this style because they allow systems to communicate over HTTP using their principles. And by principles, I mean like using their get method and post methods. It is very like resource oriented, so it focuses on users and products, which again are represented by unique URLs. It is very stateless, meaning that each API call is independent. So like the server doesn't like retain any session data about the client. So every request must contain all the information needed for the server to fulfill. However, on the other hand, WebSocket API is basically a two-way communication between client and a server over a single connection. So unlike traditional HTTP request models, WebSockets they establish a connection for real-time data exchange, which makes it stateful. So meaning that servers retain context about the client for the duration of the connection. So this scenario is ideal for like example live data, for example stock prices or sports sources, where continuous updates are essentials. And also it is really important to realize that it is a long-lived communication, meaning that once a WebSocket connection is established, it remains open until explicitly closed by either like the client or the server. So it will not end until the client or the server requests to end the communication. Continuing, Amazon API Gateway works seamlessly over other AWS services such as like AWS Lambda, DynamoDB, EC2, and more. It is very scalable, meaning that it handles unpredictable patterns of like traffic patterns. So you don't have to do any manual interventions. It automatically does it for you. It has resilience, meaning that it ensures the traffic management by allowing throttle rules and caching for REST APIs. So with caching, it reduces the backend load and handle any traffic levels without requiring any infrastructure maintenance, basically. And again, it is very developer friendly, so you can use SDK generations and deployments, and it's easy versioning. So now we're going to head up to the other topic of what cases you can use for Amazon API gateways. Number one is general use of the general use case of Amazon API Gateway is using REST API and HTTP API, which I just talked about. Again, REST API, you can manage resource methods using the HTTP verbs, you can say, like the get and post method. So example of that will be using the / income, which again is for adding or fetching incoming data. For HTTP, again, it's really cost effective API with lower latency for simple integration. So example, you can use backend integration with like AWS Lambda or any other like public HTTP endpoint. Use case 2. So these are some specific use case. So you can make chat applications. So you can make build real-time chat apps using WebSockets API or even AWS Lambda. You can use real-time dashboards like I talked about the prices and like the sport, where you can display live data with WebSocket API because you need that seamless connection without any input lag in it. You can use backend integration, use HTTP APIs to connect frontend with AWS service like Lambda or DynamoDB. Use case 3 is benefit for developers. So for API developers, again, you can simplify API creation and management using AWS tools like the SDK CLI. And you can use it with other services like I talked about, like DynamoDB and Lambda. For app developers, you can use APIs to access backend services without managing AWS accounts. And that authorization is done by, you can use Amazon Cognito, which is another service, or you can use any other like identity providers, honestly. So now we can come to security of Amazon API. So first thing, you have the authentication and authorization. So I guess the first one we can talk about, which is a big one or most used one, is the IAM, which is AWS Identity and Access Management. You can control access to APIs using IAM roles and policies, and you can also ensure the authorized user or application can call your API. You can use custom authorize. Again, for that, you can use custom logic of AWS Lambda to do advanced authorization, or you can use Amazon Cognito for simplified user authentication and authorization. You can use your Amazon Cognito user pools for token-based access, basically. Second, we have data security. You use TLS encryption. TLS stands for transfer layer security, so all communication between client and API gateway is encrypted. And also you can use custom domain names, so you can secure your API traffic using your own domain, or you can use like a TLS certified managed by like AWS certified manager. Then we have DDoS attack. DDoS means denial of service attacks. Again, it is integrated with AWS Shield standard, another service to protect APIs from DDoS. And finally, you have monitoring and logging. Again, you can use Amazon AWS CloudWatch, which monitors API requests and detect any anomalies or any other fishy stuff going on. So these features makes API Gateway really highly secure and scalable for building APIs in the cloud. Some advantage. There are many advantages. So first we can talk about is it is a fully managed service, so there's no need for like maintain servers for APIs. Everything of API Gateway handles the infrastructure, so you can just be creative and do whatever you want. It is very scalable. Again, I talked about this, how it automatically scales to handle any traffic levels without like any interventions or manual intervention, as to say. It's very cost effective. Again, it has a pay as you go pricing models, which ensures that you only pay for the API requests made and data transferred, which again I'm going to talk about in the next slide. You have integration with AWS services. Like I said, again, you can integrate with AWS Lambda, DynamoDB, S3, CloudWatch, etc. Goes on. Very flexible. Again, you can support multiple API types. Again, it's important. The REST APIs, the HTTP APIs, and the WebSocket APIs that I talked about. Number 6, you can use high availability and resiliency. So again, you built on AWS globally distributed infrastructure and reliability and uptime. 7, you have advanced security. It offers throttle. You can use IAM, Cognito, DDoS protection that we just talked about in the last slide. It has real-time capabilities, WebSocket APIs, which remember WebSocket APIs is the two-way communication with the client and servers. You have developer productivity, like I talked about. We have SDK generation, API documentation, and modding via CloudWatch. And last but not least, caching, which we reduce the backend low latency with the response caching. So Amazon API Gateway offers a flexible pay-as-you-go pricing model that varies between types of API you deploy. So we have REST APIs, we have HTTP APIs, and WebSocket APIs. So I wrote down the whole thing, but the pricing model goes. But the gist of it is how the first 12 months are free for 1 million API calls per month. But then as you see, like for example, on the REST APIs, the first 333 million requests per month is $3.50 per million requests. And as you can see, as you increase on the requests, the pricing goes down. So the more you use, the less you pay. And here's the example. So pricing example would be, let's say an API is a serverless web application that is invoking Lambda to return a web page, a dynamic web page. You're getting 10,000 page loads per minute. Each API request is 12 kilobytes and the response is 46 kilobytes. So you take 10,000 page loads per minute, seconds, during 24 hours a day, 30 days a month, or a month basically. You get 432 million requests per month. You take $300, multiply that by $1 per million requests, and you take the other 132 million, do 90 cents per million. You get 118. You add that together, you get $418.08, which is again 80 cents. Sorry, which is again 97 cents per million request, which is pretty good. So in conclusion, Amazon API Gateway is a powerful and flexible service that simplifies API management, making it ideal for building secure, scalable, and cost-effective application. It's seamless integration with AWS service and like security features, and it supports multiple API types, like I said, REST, HTTP, and WebSockets. It enables developers to focus on the innovation without having to worry about the infrastructure, which is, I think, amazing. Whether for real-time applications or like any like serverless architectures or even backend integration, again, API Gateway is a trusted tool for modern cloud native solution, and Amazon API Gateway just makes it way simpler and easier for developers to go ahead and make their creation without having to worry about the infrastructure. And again, with the pricing model, this makes it so much easier, so much cheaper. It makes it so much less stress, and with the security built-ins and with any other Amazon services, is Amazon API Gateway is just it's good. And again, thank you so much, and that will be all.